Welcome back. Now, for the crisis-struck people of Venezuela, Chinese relief supplies have arrived. On Monday, some 2 million units of Chinese medical equipment landed in Caracas, the Venezuelan capital, the second such dispatch of China's citizens in 3 months. The Latin American country is suffering shortage of medicine as well as food, given the political unrest since the opposition leader Juan Guaido declared himself interim president in January, following Nicolas Maduro's re-election last year. Maduro's government has permitted aid deliveries from NGOs such as the Red Cross, but closed Venezuela's borders to aid from countries that endorse Guaido, including the United States, the UK, Canada, and Germany. Meanwhile, Guaido continues to appeal to the U.S. military to pressure Maduro to resign. So how much of a dent will Chinese aid make in Venezuela's suffering, and will the Pentagon actually deliver a military option to Venezuela? What comes next for the country? Joining us to discuss all of this in our Beijing studio, we have Dr. Alessandro Golombiewski Teixeira, professor at the School of Public Policy and Management at Tsinghua University, who is also an economic advisor to the former Brazilian President Dilma Rousseff. And in our Shanghai studio, we are joined by Professor New Haibin, Deputy Director of the Center for American Studies in the Shanghai Institute for International Studies. So, gentlemen, thank you for joining us on the program. I'd like to start with Professor New in Shanghai first, because when 65 tons of medicine and medical supplies from China arrived in the Venezuelan capital in late March, the Chinese ambassador to the country said this marks a part of a pragmatic cooperation between the two countries. And Venezuela's Minister of Industry and National Production echoed that sentiment, saying the two sides will further enhance that pragmatic cooperation. So how do you understand this new consensus reached by the two sides, Professor New?
I think both sides are emphasizing the concept of pragmatic cooperation, which is quite important for both countries to build a very strong, strategic, comprehensive relationship in the past 2 decades. So at the current stage, I think this is still important, not only in terms of this kind of humanitarian aid, and also the Chinese expert to fix the problem of the country's electricity system. But I think the most important thing for both countries now is to maintain a strong trade relationship. In the first quarter of this year, the bilateral trade volume reached $2 billion, which is quite important for the country facing strong external pressures. So China still maintains the largest trade partner of the country, which is important for the country to improve its human daily life.
And Professor Teixeira, the Chinese ambassador also cited a key factor regarding that medical aid, what he called mutual trust. So how would you describe such political trust at a moment when Venezuela is faced with an unsettled political environment and even the possibility of a foreign military intervention?
It's a very important element because China has been a first-hand partner of Venezuela for more than a decade. A large investment, large trade. So helping Venezuela in this difficult moment is a very important element. It is an example of trust, in my opinion. So I believe that President Maduro has refused some aid from different countries because those countries, they help to destabilize the system in Venezuela. It's always important to remember that President Maduro was elected democratically by the people of Venezuela. So the role that China is playing in the region, and especially in Venezuela, it's very, very important to keep democracy, to defend the people of Venezuela. So if any country around the world have one person that the president or the opposition declare itself the new president, how are we going to end our system in the future? So this is where China stands, in my opinion, is the right position to be.
So I want to follow up on that, Professor Teixeira. Does it matter then when and why aid from the U.S. and other Western countries were refused by Caracas?
Yes, because it was not just the United States. For example, France was verbally one of the first countries to recognize Guaido as the president, okay? So this ad, Maduro, the way Maduro thinks is that why I'm receiving ad for countries that are putting pressure to destabilize my system. So Russian position, China position, and other countries, Uruguay position is very important because they say, let Venezuela take care of their own problem. You know? So we have more problems from outside to Maduro than inside Venezuela. So that's what makes the tension. You just mentioned at the beginning of the program that Guaido is pushing the United States to intervene militarily. Why? You know, if the people of Venezuela, they want to be on the streets, they could be on the street, but they support Maduro because Chavez and Maduro did a great work for bringing the poor out of the poverty in the country.
And that's right. So we know there are insurrection plans by opponents of the Maduro government, as Guaido again is reportedly seeking Washington's military support, or perhaps we can call it seeking military intervention by Washington in Venezuela. So Professor New, do we have any clue in terms of whether or not the United States would actually rule out such an option anytime soon? I mean, President Trump has said that all options remain on the table, but could it be possible eventually that military option is taken out?
Unfortunately, there is still a strong intention from the U.S. to refuse to rule out the military option in solve the crisis of Venezuela, because this keeps the military option on the table will help the U.S. to allow the political space for the opposition leaders, and also to give the real pressure to the military of the country. And this is so the U.S. tries to use all options open and to make the extreme pressure strategy workable or credible. But there is also the strong opposition to the military option in the United States and in the region and in the world. So, for example, I think in the policy circle, the think tank level in the Washington, D.C., there is these strong doubts, usefulness, effectiveness of the military option, because it will introduce long-lasting domestic disorder for Venezuela. It cannot be solved only by the military means. So without a strong and lasting political negotiation among the major key stakeholders of the country, I think the military option, in the eyes also of the American policy people, it is important to get a real effective solution to the current crisis of the country.
And I do actually want to play this scenario out. If then we see U.S. intervention in Venezuela, Professor Teixeira, how do you think other Latin Americans and other countries in the region may possibly react? Because there is quite an interesting history, as you know, between the United States and South America and Latin American countries.
I think there is two reactions that is possible. First of all, I believe that the United States needs to understand that Latin America is not their backyard like it was in the 80s. You know, the countries, different countries like Peru, Colombia, Ecuador, Costa Rica, even the Caribbean countries, they develop itself, they have a very stabilized political system. So I believe that would damage the region. Of course, there is some countries like my own country, Brazil, that is allied to the United States in the first order, but the military system in Brazil doesn't see as an option the interventions of the military of the United States, because they understand how deep this solution is going to take and how costly it's going to be to Latin America. So I believe Latin American countries, they would stand against any military intervention in the region.
Okay, now when addressing this Venezuela issue earlier this month, the spokesperson for China's Foreign Ministry, Geng Shuang, said this. Let's put up some graphics here. He said that China insists that this issue should be resolved through inclusive political dialogue and consultation under Venezuela's constitution, between the government and the opposition independently. We stand against, that is, China stands against external interference and unilateral sanctions. The spokesman's comment coming in response to the EU's call to create an environment to resolve the political crisis in Venezuela with 8 other countries and 4 Latin American countries. Professor Teixeira, I want to ask you, is a constitutional solution on the table as we stand right now?
I believe it is, but depending how much pressure you put. The international contact group that you just mentioned that was formed had 3 meetings already. The last meeting was in San Jose, Costa Rica, and the results were not very strong. So I believe that we need to have and to leave Venezuela to solve its own problem. The majority of the problem that Venezuela have now is created outside Venezuela. So if you don't allow them to solve their own problems, it's going to be difficult because you always have external factors involving in that crisis.
Okay, we are running out of time. We have maybe about 1 minute left, but Professor New, I want to get your take in terms of when we wait for this political situation to be resolved, somehow can foreign aid be sustained if the crisis fails to end soon? Let's think about the people here. Professor New, to you.
I think the international aid is important for sorry.
Professor New, can you hear me? Professor Teixeira, I think, how about we pick up that point with you?
Okay.
Do you think foreign aid can be sustained
yes,
if this crisis fails to end anytime soon?
I think it is. It's in fact you need until they stabilize the system. So the help of China, Russia, and especially the countries that are interested to see a better solution and a peaceful dialogue need to help Venezuela.
Okay, we are going to leave it there. Many thanks for your insights, gentlemen. Professor Teixeira, professor at the School of Public Policy and Management at Tsinghua University, and Professor New Haibin, Deputy Director of the Center for American Studies in the Shanghai Institute for International Studies. Thank you to you both for your insights on this topic.